So the primary aspect of my human rights capstone is organizing a gun buyback in New Haven. So the way a gun buyback works is that you incentivize individuals in the community to turn in their weapons. So how we're doing that is we're offering gift cards. So for every weapon that someone turns in, they receive some amount in a gift card, and this gift card cannot be exchanged for cash. It can only be used at certain places. And we also have a no questions asked policy to incentivize further kind of community participation in the project. So we're not asking how people obtain their weapons, whether they obtain them legally or illegally. They're able to participate in this buyback. So that's the kind of the practical component of my project. I'm working with Yale New Haven Hospital, the New Haven Police Department, faith-based institutions in New Haven, and a few community-based groups as well. And then I'm complementing that with an academic paper that's looking at the role of human rights language in debates around gun violence in the US and in Australia, and kind of seeing when human rights is an effective tool in domestic issues in both countries and why there kind of exists a lack of human rights rhetoric around gun violence. Yeah, I first got the idea of doing a gun buyback actually this summer in June. I was just reading the Sunday Times and came across an article about this nonprofit called Gun by Gun that has primarily worked on the West Coast and organized really impressive and extensive gun buybacks there. And I thought that was really interesting. I hadn't heard of buybacks before, so I actually just emailed the nonprofit and arranged to talk to them, and they were super excited and wanted to help me out spearheading one in New Haven. And then I think for me also the reason it was so attractive is because I've been thinking a lot about political inaction around gun violence. So it seems like every few months we have a mass shooting and we have thoughts and prayers, and then there's another one. So what can we do in an age where Congress is very reluctant to pass bills that prohibit gun violence or protect American citizens from gun violence? And this seems like an on-the-ground project that ordinary people can engage in. So me, a Yale student, working with community-based groups and faith-based institutions in New Haven in conjunction with the police department and the hospital, it's a bunch of people in the city who care about gun violence. And even though it's not going to solve the problem, it's definitely a start. Yeah, I think my previous work in journalism and connecting journalism with human rights has really kind of informed the way I wanted to go about and approach this project. So I spent this past summer working at ProPublica, which is a nonprofit newsroom in New York. And I was working on a project looking at how states train police recruits to respond to hate crimes. And a lot of ProPublica's work, a lot of my interest in journalism is how do we keep institutions accountable and how do we encourage civic action when our federal government is not responding to problems that we really care about and know are important. And I think the gun buyback kind of follows that framework in that we are working with a group of citizens and institutions in New Haven to kind of pursue justice through an alternate framework, one that doesn't rely on the federal government and kind of flies in the face of inaction on behalf of our government. Yeah, I mean, I think I've learned a lot about human rights, not only through my capstone, but also through the program. I think when I first entered this program as a sophomore, my understanding of human rights was so limited. I probably thought a few issues were human rights issues, and working on a gun violence campaign in New Haven, gun violence in the US isn't typically traditionally seen as a human rights issue, but to me it very clearly is, and I think understanding that human rights is a flexible tool that can be used to combat all sorts of issues is one that I've recently learned or been learning the last few years at Yale, and is really exciting to leave Yale with that knowledge. I think I've also learned, I think it's an interesting kind of dichotomy in the way American policymakers approach human rights in terms of looking at international issues as human rights issues, but then looking at issues in the US in a domestic context as very clearly not human rights issues, even though they often are. So I think that dichotomy is something that I hope to point out more in the future.